He was a ghost in her life, a memory of a single night that had defined the 5 years of silence that followed. If you believe that some love stories are battles worth fighting for, help us honor them with a super thanks. And if you feel the ache of Isabella's long wait, leave a "Your heart remembers Isabella" in the comments. The organ music swelled, a tide of sound meant to signal joy. But for Isabella Devereaux, it was the solemn, thunderous closing of a gilded cage. She stood in the narthex of St. Michael's Church in Charleston, a vision in ivory silk and heirloom lace, the scent of lilies and old money thick in the air. Outside, the South Carolina sun beat down on the historic cobblestones, but inside, the air was cool, heavy with the weight of expectation. Her father, Senator William Devereaux, stood beside her, his hand on her arm, not as a gesture of paternal affection, but of ownership. He was not giving his daughter away, he was finalizing a merger. Richard Sterling, the man waiting for her at the altar, was the other half of the deal, the handsome, predictable, and emotionally sterile heir to a banking fortune. Their union would consolidate two of the most powerful families in the state, a fact that had been celebrated in society columns and whispered about in boardrooms for months. Isabella was the treaty, signed and sealed in couture. She felt like a beautiful, breathing ghost, her body present, but her soul, her real self, had gone missing 5 years ago on a rain-swept night in the arms of a man whose name she barely knew, a soldier who had vanished with the dawn. 5 years, an eternity. For the first year, she had searched for him with a quiet, frantic desperation that she hid from her family. She had called every military base within 100 miles. Her vague description of a tall, quiet black soldier named Elias met with polite, bureaucratic stone walls. She had revisited the rundown apartment building where they had spent those few stolen hours, only to find the unit empty, its previous tenant having shipped out with no forwarding address. Her father, sensing her distraction, had tightened the leash. He saw the episode not as a heartbreak, but as a dangerous lapse in judgment, a stain to be scrubbed from the family ledger. He had filled her life with carefully curated distractions, charity work, European travel, and a steady, relentless promotion of Richard Sterling as her perfect match. Over time, the raw, aching wound of Elias's disappearance had scabbed over, leaving a scar of quiet resignation. She had accepted her fate. She had agreed to the merger. She had learned to smile when her photograph was taken and to say the right things at the right parties. She had become the perfect Devereaux daughter. But in the silent, unguarded moments of the night, the memory of him would return, as sharp and clear as the day it was forged. It had been at her father's annual charity gala. She was 22, home from college, and suffocating under the weight of her own name. She had stood on a marble terrace, feigning interest in the inane chatter of the city's elite when she first saw him. He was working security, standing in the shadows near the gardens, his posture a study in disciplined stillness. He was not part of their world. He was a sentinel guarding its perimeter. In his simple black suit, he was more imposing than any of the powerful men in their tuxedos. It was his eyes that had captured her. They were old eyes in a young face, calm and watchful, holding a depth of experience that made her feel like a child. He was, to her father's friends, invisible, a piece of human furniture. But to Isabella, he was the only real person in the entire place. Later, needing to escape the cloying atmosphere, she had slipped out into the gardens. He had materialized from the shadows, his presence not threatening, but reassuring. "Are you all right, Mom?" he'd asked, his voice a low, steady rumble that seemed to vibrate in the humid night air. She had looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time that night, she didn't feel like an heiress. She felt like a woman. "I'm just tired of the noise," she'd said, the confession slipping out. He had simply nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He knew about noise, the kind that came from crowds and the kind that echoed in your head long after the battle was over. Their conversation that night was a series of stolen moments, brief exchanges by the fountain, a shared glance across a crowded room. His name was Elias. He was a sergeant. He was just back from a place he didn't want to talk about. He spoke very little, but when he did, his words were direct, honest, and stripped of all artifice. He didn't flatter her or treat her like a prize. He spoke to her as an equal. As the gala wound down and a sudden thunderstorm rolled in from the coast, she found herself unwilling to let the connection end. When he walked out into the rain at the end of his shift, she followed him. She had dismissed her driver, an act of rebellion so small and yet so monumental. In the downpour, under the sulfur-yellow glow of a streetlight, she had asked him to take her somewhere real. He had hesitated, his cold, disciplined exterior warring with something else in his eyes. He knew the danger. He knew the chasm that separated their worlds. But he saw the desperate plea in her eyes, a plea for escape that resonated with his own. He had taken her to his apartment, a small, bare-bones room that was as neat and orderly as a barracks. There was a mattress on the floor, a single chair, and a shelf of books. It was the most honest place she had ever been. That night was not just a night of passion, it was a night of truth. In the safety of his small room, with the rain lashing against the window, they had shed the uniforms of their lives. She was not a Devereaux heiress, and he was not just a soldier. They were just a man and a woman, starved for a connection that was genuine. He had listened to her talk about the suffocating expectations, the loneliness of her life, and he, in turn, had shared small, fractured pieces of his own. The rigid discipline of his upbringing, the crushing weight of responsibility, the ghosts he carried. He never touched her with anything but a profound respect until she reached for him, her hand on his face, a silent request to be seen, to be felt. Their coming together was not a seduction, it was a surrender. It was a desperate, beautiful collision of two worlds, a moment of pure, undiluted honesty in a life of lies. For those few hours, in that bare room, Isabella had felt more alive, more herself than she ever had before. When she fell asleep in his arms, the sound of his steady heartbeat a lullaby against her ear, she believed she had found the beginning of her real life. She awoke to a cold, empty bed. The early morning light filtered through the window, illuminating a room devoid of his presence. He was gone. His boots were gone. The uniform he had hung neatly on the back of the door was gone. The only sign he had ever been there was a single, neatly folded army blanket he had left at the foot of the mattress, and the lingering masculine scent of soap and rain that clung to the pillow. There was no note, no word. He had simply vanished. The silence he left behind was a physical blow, a void that consumed all the warmth and hope of the night before. The humiliation had been a sharp, searing pain, followed by a deeper ache of betrayal. She had given him the most vulnerable part of herself, and he had treated it like nothing. When her father's security team, dispatched after her unprecedented disappearance, had found her, her shame was complete. The senator's face had been a mask of cold fury. He had not asked if she was hurt. He had not offered comfort. He had simply said, "This will be forgotten. It never happened." And for 5 years, she had tried to obey. She had let him erase Elias, burying the memory under layers of duty and resignation. But now, standing at the threshold of the church, the ghost of that cold soldier stood beside her, more real than the man waiting at the altar. She took a deep, shuddering breath, the scent of lilies choking her, and prepared to walk toward her perfectly arranged, loveless future. The heavy oak doors of the sanctuary swung open, a silent, ceremonial exhale. The first wave of organ music, Bach's Jesu, joy of man's desiring, washed over Isabella, not as a joyful melody, but as a somber liturgical score for a sacrifice. 1,000 pairs of eyes, the collective gaze of Charleston's high society, turned toward her. She saw them not as individual faces, but as a single judgmental entity, a gallery of witnesses to the formal surrender of her life. Her father's hand tightened on her arm, a silent command to begin. She took the first step, then the second, her movements slow and measured, a prisoner walking the final mile. The aisle, carpeted in a deep crimson, stretched before her like a river of blood she was being forced to cross. With each step, she felt the weight of the last 5 years pressing down, forcing the air from her lungs. She had fought, and she had lost. This walk was the formal acknowledgement of her defeat. Her father, Senator Devereaux, was a pillar of smiling paternal pride for the cameras and the crowd. But Isabella felt the rigid tension in his arm, the proprietary grip, that had guided her entire existence. She remembered a conversation in his study a year ago after Richard's meticulously planned proposal. She had hesitated, a final, futile flicker of rebellion. The senator had not raised his voice. He never did. He simply sat behind his mahogany desk, a portrait of a Confederate general looming over his shoulder, and laid out her reality with the dispassionate precision of a surgeon. "Isabella," he had said, steepling his fingers, "love is a luxury for the poets and the poor. We, my dear, are in the business of legacy. The Sterling's banking connections will secure this family's influence for the next 50 years. Richard is a good man. He is suitable. He will not cause you any trouble." He had paused, his gaze as cold and sharp as a shard of glass. "And he will certainly not abandon you in a cheap motel room before the sun is up. This is your duty. It is the price you pay for the life you have been given. Do not disappoint me again." The unspoken threat hung in the air between them. Again, the word was a knife, twisting in the old wound of her one and only transgression. Elias. This marriage wasn't just a merger, it was her penance. Her gaze drifted over the pews. She saw her mother, a woman who had long ago perfected the art of the serene, vacant smile, a beautiful ornament who had made her own transactional marriage decades ago. She saw Richard's parents, the Sterlings, their faces radiating a quiet, satisfied avarice. She saw business partners, political allies and rivals, all of them here to witness the consolidation of power. They were not celebrating a marriage, they were attending a coronation of two dynasties. Not a single person in this magnificent hallowed hall knew her. They knew her name, her pedigree, her photograph, but the girl who had shared her secrets in a bare room while the rain fell, the woman who had experienced a single night of raw, unvarnished truth, that person was a stranger to them all. She was a stranger even to herself most days, but not today. Today, the memory of Elias was a roaring fire inside her, burning away the carefully constructed facade of the perfect daughter. Finally, her eyes landed on the man at the altar, Richard Sterling. He was everything a man of his station was supposed to be: tall, classically handsome, with blonde hair perfectly coiffed. His tuxedo was bespoke, his posture impeccable. He looked like a model in a magazine for expensive watches. He was smiling at her, a polished, practiced smile that did not reach his eyes. His eyes, a pale, forgettable blue, were assessing her as she approached. He was inspecting his acquisition, checking for flaws. She could see the faint glimmer of pride in them, the satisfaction of possessing something so beautiful, so valuable. He was not looking at Isabella. He was looking at a Devereaux. He saw the lace, the name, the access. He saw a beautiful hostess for his parties, a suitable mother for his heirs. He saw the completion of a contract. She remembered the way Elias had looked at her. His gaze had been intense, unnerving, as if he were trying to see past her skin, past her name, into the very core of her. He had seen her fear and her loneliness, and he had not flinched. Richard's gaze slid over her like water, leaving nothing but a chill behind. She thought of their hands. Richard's were smooth, his nails perfectly manicured. She had held them during their formal courtship, and his touch was always cool, dry, and disconnected. She remembered the feel of Elias's hands. They were rough, calloused, the hands of a man who worked, who fought. When he had touched her face that night, his touch had been hesitant at first, then firm, possessive, a current of heat and life passing from his skin to hers. His hands had told a story of hardship and strength. Richard's told a story of privilege and ease. As she drew closer, the details of the altar came into sharp focus. The towering floral arrangements, the gleaming gold crucifix, the ancient leather-bound Bible on the lectern. The priest, a man who had known her family for generations, gave her a gentle, beatific smile. Everything was perfect. Everything was in its place. A wave of nausea, cold and sharp, washed over her. The cage was so beautiful, so ornate, that everyone mistook it for a palace. She was there. The endless walk was over. She stood before the altar, at the precipice of her future. Her father, his duty done, gently unhooked his arm from hers. He took her hand, and with all the solemnity of a king transferring a crown, he placed it into Richard's outstretched palm. The moment their skin touched, a profound, visceral cold shot through Isabella. Richard's hand was a dead thing. It enclosed hers, his grip formal, proprietary. It was the closing of a lock, the final seal on a contract. The senator stepped back, his face a mask of supreme satisfaction. The merger was complete. The priest cleared his throat, his rich, sonorous voice filling the cavernous silence of the church. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today in the sight of God and in the face of this company to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The words droned on, familiar and meaningless. Isabella's mind detached. She was floating above the scene, watching a play in which she was the lead actress. She saw herself, a still, silent figure in white. She saw the handsome groom, the proud father, the adoring crowd. It was a perfect picture, a perfect lie. Her heart, a small, stubborn bird that had refused to stop beating for 5 years, began to slow. It was over. There would be no rescue. There would be no escape. She had to accept the silence, the cold, the emptiness. She had to become Mrs. Richard Sterling. The priest turned to Richard. "Do you, Richard William Sterling, take this woman, Isabella Rose Devereaux, to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Isabella closed her eyes, a single traitorous tear escaping to trace a cold path down her cheek. She did not hear Richard's confident, "I do." She heard only the sound of a closing door and the echo of a man's voice in a rain-swept room, a ghost who had stolen her soul and never returned it. The priest's voice, a smooth, practiced baritone, turned its focus on her. "And do you, Isabella Rose Devereaux, take this man, Richard William Sterling, to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" The question hung in the air, a final gilded nail waiting to be hammered into the coffin of her life. The 1,000 pairs of eyes in the pews were fixed on her, their collective weight pressing down, demanding the expected answer. Her father's gaze was a laser beam of command from the front pew. Richard's hand, still holding hers, gave a slight, confident squeeze, a physical punctuation to the priest's words, a reminder of the contract. The silence stretched. 1 second, 2. A nervous cough rippled through the congregation. Richard's smile tightened at the edges, a flicker of annoyance in his pale blue eyes. This was not part of the script. Isabella's lips were parted, but no sound came out. Her mind was a maelstrom, a chaotic swirl of past and present, of duty and a wild, suicidal urge to scream, "No!" She saw her entire future laid out before her, a series of beautiful, empty rooms, polite, passionless dinners, and the slow, quiet suffocation of her soul. And then it happened. Not with a crash of thunder or a dramatic interruption, but with a quiet, authoritative sound that sliced through the sanctified air of the church. The sound of the massive, heavy oak doors at the back of the sanctuary opening. Every head, as if pulled by a single string, turned. Isabella's gaze followed, her heart suddenly pounding a frantic, desperate rhythm against her ribs. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright afternoon light, was a figure, a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his presence seemed to suck all the air out of the room, creating a vacuum of silent, stunned shock. He was dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, but he wore it like a uniform. He stood with the unshakable stillness of a man who was completely in command of himself and his environment. As her eyes adjusted to the light, she saw his face, and the world, her carefully constructed, miserable world, simply stopped turning. It was him, Elias. He was different, yet utterly the same. The 5 years had carved new lines into his face, adding a harder, more formidable edge to his features. The quiet, watchful soldier she remembered was still there in his eyes, but now there was something more, a cold, unyielding confidence, the quiet authority of a man who did not ask for power, but simply possessed it. His gaze swept over the congregation, dismissive and assessing, before it landed on her. And in that moment, the 5 years of silence, the heartbreak, the humiliation, all of it evaporated. His eyes locked with hers, and the connection was as instantaneous and electric as it had been on that rain-swept night. He saw her, not the bride, not the Devereaux heiress. He saw her, the woman trapped inside the lace and the lies. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a greeting, it was an acknowledgement. I am here. A furious, whispered hiss came from the front pew. Senator Devereaux was on his feet, his face a mask of apoplectic rage. "Who is that? Security, get him out of here!" he snarled, his voice a low, venomous command. Two ushers, large men who were also part of the senator's private security detail, started moving up the aisle, their expressions a mixture of confusion and aggression. But they stopped dead in their tracks as Elias took a single step into the church. He was no longer alone. Two other men, dressed in identical dark suits and moving with the same silent, predatory grace, had materialized on either side of him. They were not ushers, they were professionals. Their eyes scanned the room, noting the exits, assessing the threats, their hands held loosely at their sides in a posture of relaxed readiness that was more menacing than any overt threat. The senator's men recognized what they were seeing and wisely halted their advance. The priest, flustered, cleared his throat again. "Sir, this is a private ceremony," he began, his voice wavering. Elias ignored him. His focus was entirely on Isabella. He began to walk down the aisle, his steps unhurried, deliberate and utterly silent on the crimson carpet. The sound of his progress was the only thing in the cavernous, tomb-like silence of the church. He was not walking. He was advancing. It was a tactical movement, the approach of a predator who knows its prey cannot escape. Richard, finally shaken from his stunned disbelief, dropped Isabella's hand as if it were on fire. He took a step forward, placing himself between Isabella and the approaching man. "Who the hell are you?" Richard demanded, his voice a mixture of arrogance and a tremor of fear he couldn't quite conceal. "You have no right to be here." Elias did not break his stride. He stopped directly in front of Richard, his physical presence so imposing that Richard, who was not a small man, seemed to shrink. Elias looked down at him, not with anger, but with a profound, dismissive contempt. "Your business is not with me," Elias said, his voice the same low, steady rumble she remembered, a voice that could calm a storm or start a war. "It's with the lady. Step aside." "The lady is my fiancée," Richard spat, puffing out his chest in a pathetic display of dominance. Elias's gaze was utterly cold. "Is she?" he asked softly, the question directed not at Richard, but over his shoulder to Isabella. He was asking her to choose, to declare her allegiance. All the years of silent obedience, of being a pawn in her father's games, culminated in this single, terrifying moment of choice. She could stay behind Richard, the symbol of her gilded prison, or she could step into the terrifying, unknown freedom that Elias represented. Her father's voice, now shaking with uncontrollable fury, boomed from the side. "Isabella, do not move. I forbid it." Her entire life, that voice had been the voice of God, a command she had never dared to disobey. But now it sounded weak, impotent. The only thing that mattered was the question in Elias's eyes. She looked at Richard's back, at the entitled set of his shoulders. She looked at her father, his face purple with rage. Then she looked at Elias. He had abandoned her once. He had broken her heart. He had vanished without a word. She had every reason to hate him, to fear him. But in his eyes, she did not see a threat. She saw a promise. She saw the man who had listened to her secrets in a bare room. She saw the only person in her entire life who had seen the real her. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, Isabella took a single, decisive step to the side, moving out from behind Richard's shadow. She was no longer hiding. She was choosing a side, her side. Richard looked at her, his expression a mask of shocked betrayal. "Isabella, what are you doing?" Elias did not so much as glance at him. His victory was complete. He held out his hand to her. It was the same calloused, strong hand she remembered. She hesitated for only a heartbeat. Then she lifted her own hand, the silk of her sleeve rustling, and placed it in his. The moment their skin touched, the same current of heat, of life, shot through her. It was a homecoming. His fingers closed around hers, not with the proprietary grip of Richard, but with a firm, protective strength that anchored her in the swirling chaos. He turned, still holding her hand, and began to lead her back down the aisle, away from the altar, away from the priest, away from her father and the life he had planned for her. The congregation was a sea of slack-jawed, horrified faces. They were witnessing the unthinkable, the public shattering of a carefully brokered dynasty, the theft of a Devereaux bride from the very altar of her sacrifice. Her father's roar of pure animal rage echoed off the stone walls. "You will not take my daughter. I will destroy you." Elias didn't even turn around. He just kept walking, pulling Isabella with him, a man on a mission who had just secured his objective. As they reached the great oak doors, he paused and looked down at her, his cold, unreadable eyes softening for just a fraction of a second. "The noise is over now," he said quietly, for her ears only, and then he led her out of the church, into the blinding sunlight and the complete unknown. Stepping out of the cool, dim church and into the unforgiving glare of the Carolina sun was a violent transition. For a moment, Isabella was blinded, disoriented. The world was a blur of bright light and the roaring sound in her ears, which she realized was not just the ringing of her own shock, but the enraged, incoherent shouts of her father, still echoing from the sanctuary behind them. Elias's hand was an anchor in the storm. His grip was firm, unwavering, pulling her forward through the chaos he had created. The crowd of guests who had been lingering outside, waiting to shower the happy couple with rice, were now a frozen tableau of disbelief. Cell phones were already emerging, the small black eyes of their cameras turning to capture the scandal of the century. Isabella instinctively flinched, the ingrained horror of a public scene, of family disgrace rising in her. But Elias was a shield. He positioned his body slightly in front of hers, blocking her from the worst of the stairs, his presence a silent, formidable wall that no one dared to breach. A sleek black sedan, the kind that speaks of government officials or private security, was idling at the curb, its engine a low, powerful thrum. One of Elias's men, who had moved ahead with the fluid efficiency of a trained operative, already had the rear door open. Elias guided her toward it, his movements economical and swift. He helped her into the back seat, the voluminous layers of her wedding dress bunching awkwardly, a ridiculous costume from a life that had just ended. He slid in beside her, and the door closed with a solid, definitive thud, encasing them in a cocoon of tinted glass and cool, conditioned air. The world outside went silent. The car pulled away from the curb smoothly, effortlessly, leaving the chaos of St. Michael's Church, the stunned guests, the furious father, the jilted groom behind them. Isabella stared out the rear window, watching the magnificent Gothic facade of the church shrink in the distance. It looked like a mausoleum, a beautiful tomb she had just narrowly escaped. She turned to look at the man beside her, the stranger who knew her soul. He was not looking at her. He was staring straight ahead, his profile as stern and unreadable as a Roman coin. The adrenaline that had propelled her down the aisle was beginning to recede, and in its place, a tidal wave of questions and a cold, creeping fear began to rise. Who was this man? The quiet, impoverished soldier she had met was gone. This man moved with an aura of power and resources that was utterly at odds with the memory she had clung to for 5 years. The suit he wore was not off the rack. It was bespoke, the fabric a dark, rich wool that draped perfectly over his powerful frame. The watch on his wrist was a discreet, brutally expensive timepiece. The men who flanked him were not just friends, they were professional operators. Where had he been? Why had he left? And why, after 5 years of absolute silence, had he chosen this moment, this impossibly dramatic way to return? The humiliation of his abandonment, an old, familiar poison, began to seep back into her veins. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice a reedy whisper, the first words she had spoken since her world had been upended. "Somewhere safe," he replied, his voice calm and even, his gaze still fixed fixed on the road ahead. Somewhere he can't reach you. He, her father. The word and the casual certainty with which Elias spoke it sent a fresh chill down her spine. He understood the real threat. It wasn't Richard. Richard was a pawn, the king on this board. The one who would now be moving every piece he controlled to destroy them was Senator Devereaux. "Why?" she asked, the single word encompassing a universe of pain. "Why did you leave? Why did you come back now?" Elias was silent for a long moment, the only sound the soft hum of the tires on the asphalt. When he finally turned to look at her, his eyes were dark, a fathomless depth of emotions she couldn't begin to read. "I left because I had to," he said, his voice low. "I was a sergeant with nothing to my name but a duffel bag and a collection of bad memories. Your father would have crushed me like an insect, and he would have used you to do it. He would have destroyed your reputation, isolated you, made you a prisoner. My staying would not have saved you. It would have only guaranteed the destruction of us both." His words were stark, brutal, and held the undeniable ring of truth. She knew her father. She knew the cold, ruthless lengths to which he would go to protect his family's name and power. Elias, the penniless black soldier, would have been a scandal he could not tolerate. He would have been arrested on trumped-up charges, dishonorably discharged or worse, and she would have been powerless to stop it. "And you couldn't have written," she whispered, the old, childish hurt surfacing. "A phone call? A single word in 5 years?" A muscle tightened in his jaw. "There were no words I could have sent that wouldn't have been intercepted. No message that wouldn't have put you in more danger. Your father's reach is long, Isabella. I knew he would be watching you, listening to everything. The only way to protect you was to disappear completely, to make him believe I was gone for good, that you had forgotten about me. I had to let him win, for a time." The car was heading out of the city now, onto a highway that cut through the low country marshlands, the landscape a blur of green and gold. "So what changed?" she asked, her voice gaining a bit of strength. "What's different now?" He turned to face her more fully in the seat, and for the first time she saw a flicker of something other than cold control in his eyes. It was a grim, hard-won satisfaction. "What's different," he said, "is that I am no longer an insect. I spent the last 5 years making sure that when I came back, I would not be coming back to a battle I couldn't win. I came back to a war I was prepared for." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The car, the men, the suit, they were all pieces of the answer. He had been arming himself, gathering resources, building an army. He had not abandoned the fight. He had staged a strategic retreat in order to regroup for a future decisive engagement. And that engagement had just begun. He had not just stolen her from the altar. He had fired the first shot in a war against her father. She sank back into the soft leather seat, her mind reeling. This wasn't a fairy tale rescue. This wasn't a romance. This was a tactical operation. She was not a princess being saved from a dragon. She was a high-value asset being extracted from an enemy stronghold. The thought was both terrifying and, in a strange way, exhilarating. For her entire life, she had been a passive object, a daughter, an heiress, a fiancée, moved around a board by powerful men. Elias was also a powerful man, but he was not moving her. He was asking her to move with him. He was treating her not as a prize, but as an ally. A deep, resonant anger began to replace her fear. Anger at her father for the years of emotional manipulation, at Richard for his complacent ownership, at the whole stifling system that had tried to suffocate her. Elias had not just rescued her from a marriage. He had given her back her rage. He had given her back herself. If the raw, untamed courage of a man who would fight a war for the woman he loves has moved you, a super thanks is the most powerful way to support our mission of telling these unforgettable stories of human defiance. The car turned off the main highway and onto a private, unmarked road that wound through a dense grove of ancient live oaks draped in Spanish moss. After a few minutes, they emerged into a clearing, and Isabella gasped. Before them was a modern minimalist house made of glass, steel, and dark wood, built right on the edge of a wide, placid river. It was a fortress of solitude, a hidden sanctuary completely isolated from the world. As the car pulled up, the front door of the house opened, and an older woman with a kind, weathered face and a shotgun held loosely in the crook of her arm stepped out, onto the porch. Elias smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his face, making him look younger, less formidable. "It's all right, Martha," he called out as he opened his door. "It's me, the woman." Martha broke into a wide grin, her suspicion melting away. She set the shotgun down, leaning it against the wall. Elias got out of the car and came around to open Isabella's door. He held out his hand again. "Welcome to my command post," he said, a hint of irony in his voice. She took his hand and stepped out of the car, the ridiculous, extravagant wedding dress a stark white beacon against the natural, wild beauty of the place. She had been extracted. She was in a safe house, and the war for her future, a future she had thought was lost forever, had just begun. The interior of the house was a continuation of its exterior, clean lines, natural materials, and vast panes of glass that erased the boundary between inside and out. It was a space designed for clarity and focus, the antithesis of the opulent, suffocating clutter of her father's Charleston mansion. It was a soldier's house. Everything had a purpose, and there was no room for excess. The main living area was a single open space with a minimalist kitchen, a sitting area with a low-slung leather sofa, and a wall of bookshelves filled not with decorative volumes but with worn paperbacks on history, military strategy, and engineering. The air smelled of wood smoke from a cold fireplace, and the clean, briny scent of the river. It was a space that was both deeply masculine and profoundly peaceful. Martha, the woman with the shotgun, enveloped Elias in a fierce maternal hug. "You had me worried, boy," she said, her voice a warm, low country drawl. 5 years is too long to go without a word, even for a ghost like you." She then turned her sharp, intelligent eyes on Isabella, taking in the absurd spectacle of the wedding dress. Her expression softened with a mixture of pity and wry amusement. "Well, I'll be," she murmured. "He finally did it. You must be the one who got under his armor." She extended a work-roughened hand. "I'm Martha. I look after this place. And him, when he lets me." Isabella took her hand, feeling a sense of gratitude for the woman's simple, uncomplicated welcome. "I'm Isabella." "I know who you are, child," Martha said kindly. "We've been expecting you for a long time." The words sent a jolt through Isabella. "We've been expecting you." This wasn't an impulsive act. This was the culmination of a long-term plan. Martha seemed to read the confusion on her face. "Don't you worry about a thing right now," she said, her tone shifting to one of practical command. "First things first, we need to get you out of that ridiculous meringue. There are clothes in the guest room. I'm sure they'll be a better fit than what you had in mind for your honeymoon." Her words were a gentle but firm tug back to reality. Isabella looked down at the dress, at the thousands of dollars of silk and lace that represented a life she had just incinerated. It felt alien now, the costume of a stranger. Following Martha down a hallway, she felt a profound sense of dislocation. Every choice, every decision for her entire life had been made for her. Now, in the span of a single hour, she had been thrust into a world where she had no script, no map, and no idea what came next. The guest room was simple and elegant, with a bed covered in a plain linen duvet and a window that offered a stunning, uninterrupted view of the river. Laid out on the bed was a set of simple, comfortable clothes. Soft jeans, a plain t-shirt, and a thick cardigan. It was a uniform for her new life. As she struggled with the dozens of tiny pearl buttons that ran down the back of her wedding dress, Martha came in to help, her fingers nimble and sure. As she worked the buttons free, she spoke in a low, comforting voice. "He's a good man, you know, the best. But he carries the world on his shoulders. Joined the army right out of high school. Special forces, saw things no man should ever see. Came back quiet, hard. That coldness you see, it's not a lack of feeling. It's a wall he built to hold all the damn ghosts in." She freed the last button, and the heavy dress finally loosened its grip. "He never brought anyone here," Martha continued, her voice soft. "Never even spoke of a woman, but I knew. A man doesn't build a fortress like this unless he's got something precious he's planning to protect." The dress pooled at Isabella's feet, a heap of discarded dreams. She stepped out of it, feeling lighter, freer than she had in years. As she pulled on the simple jeans and t-shirt, it felt like she was putting on her own skin for the first time. When she returned to the living area, Elias was standing by the large window, staring out at the river. He had taken off his suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt, revealing powerful forearms covered in a lattice of faint, silvery scars. He turned as she entered, and his eyes swept over her, taking in the transformation. The approval in his gaze was a quiet, intimate thing that made her feel more beautiful than she ever had in the expensive designer dress. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, the single word a universe of meaning. He gestured for her to join him by the window. For a long time they stood in silence, watching the slow, inexorable flow of the river toward the sea. The peace of the place was a balm on her raw nerves. "My father," she began, the question hanging in the air. "What will he do?" Elias's expression hardened, the brief moment of peace gone. "He's already doing it," he said. "Right now, he's making phone calls to the governor, to the state police, to every judge he owns. The official story will be that his distraught daughter has been abducted by a dangerous, unstable former employee. There will be a warrant for my arrest, an Amber Alert maybe, framing you as a victim. He will use the full weight of his political power and the state's resources to hunt us down. He will try to control the narrative, paint me as a villain, and you as a hysterical woman who doesn't know her own mind." He spoke with a chilling certainty, as if he were reading from a familiar playbook. "He will also use his unofficial power. He'll have private investigators looking for us. He'll put a price on my head with people who operate outside the law. He will not stop. He cannot afford the humiliation. This is not about you anymore, Isabella. It's about his power, and I have just challenged it in the most public way imaginable." The sheer scale of the forces now arrayed against them was terrifying. She felt a wave of dizziness. "Then what do? We can't stay here." "No," he agreed. "This is just a temporary rally point, a place to regroup. We leave tonight, after dark." "Leave and go where?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "The plan has contingencies," he said, a ghost of a wry smile touching his lips. He walked over to a large, flat-screen television on the wall, which she had assumed was just for entertainment. He tapped a remote, and the screen came to life, not with a cable news channel, but with a complex satellite map of the southeastern United States. It was overlaid with data streams, weather patterns, and traffic flows. It was a digital command center. "For 5 years," he said, his voice dropping into a lower, more serious register, "I have not been idle. After I left the army, I started a security and logistics company with a few of the men from my unit. We specialize in difficult extractions, corporate witnesses, political dissidents, people who need to disappear. We're very good at it. Over the years, we've built a network, an underground railroad of sorts, of safe houses, anonymous transportation, and untraceable identities." He zoomed in on their current location, a glowing red dot on the river. "Your father thinks in terms of political borders and jurisdictions. We don't. We operate in the seams. We have assets in place, routes planned. He will expect us to run west or try to get up to the northeast corridor. He will have state troopers watching every major highway." He pointed to a series of smaller secondary roads that snaked through the rural backcountry. "We will go where he is not looking." He then looked at her, his expression deadly serious. "But none of this works unless you are a willing participant. He will try to portray you as a hostage. The moment you are found, you will be surrounded by police, by the media, by your father's people. They will try to separate us. They will pressure you, manipulate you, tell you that you are sick, that you have been brainwashed. They will promise you forgiveness if you just come back and denounce me. You have to be stronger than them. You have to be ready for that fight." He was not asking her if she loved him. He was not asking for a promise of forever. He was asking her if she was a soldier. He was asking if she was ready to go to war for her own life. She thought of the cold touch of Richard's hand, the deadness in his eyes. She thought of her father's tyrannical rage. She thought of the beautiful, suffocating cage she had been born into. She looked at this man, this dangerous, complicated man who had walked through fire to come back for her. He was offering her a life that would be hard, uncertain, and fraught with peril, but it would be hers. "What do I have to do?" she asked. her voice steady and clear. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Elias's face. "For now," he said, "you eat, you rest, you get your strength back. The battle starts tonight." As twilight bled across the salt marsh, painting the river in hues of bruised purple and dusky orange, the house transformed from a tranquil sanctuary into a tightly controlled military outpost. The two men who had accompanied Elias to the church, whose names she now knew were Marcus and Ben, moved with a silent, synchronized efficiency that spoke of years of shared training. They were not just bodyguards, they were a highly disciplined unit. Ben, a compact man with the coiled energy of a panther, conducted a meticulous sweep of the property's perimeter, checking sensors she hadn't even known were there, his movements a fluid dance between the shadows of the ancient oaks. Marcus, taller and more stoic, worked inside, his fingers flying across the keyboard of a ruggedized laptop, his face illuminated by the green and blue glow of encrypted data streams. He was their communications and intelligence hub, the digital eyes and ears of the operation. There was no wasted motion, no unnecessary talk, just a low murmur of acronyms and status updates between them and Elias. Isabella watched them, a fascinated and slightly terrified observer. This was his world, a world of threats and countermeasures, of contingency plans and exfiltration routes. It was a universe away from the charity luncheons and society galas that had defined her existence. Martha, meanwhile, operated with her own brand of tactical efficiency in the kitchen. She produced a meal that was simple, hearty, and deeply comforting. A rich seafood stew, crusty bread, and strong black coffee. It was fuel, not a feast. They ate together at the large wooden table, a strange makeshift family on the eve of a campaign. Ben and Marcus ate quickly, their eyes constantly scanning, never fully relaxed. Elias ate with the same deliberate focus he applied to everything, as if assessing the stew for its tactical value. Isabella, to her own surprise, found that she was ravenously hungry. The fear and adrenaline had coalesced into a sharp, gnawing emptiness. Each spoonful of the hot, savory stew felt like a small act of rebellion, a reclaiming of her own strength. She was no longer the bride who would have picked at a meticulously crafted piece of sea base at her own wedding reception. She was a fugitive, eating what might be her last warm meal for days, and it tasted more real than anything she had eaten in years. After the meal, Elias laid a detailed topographical map on the table, holding it down with a salt shaker and a coffee mug. It showed the labyrinth of swamps, rivers, and rural backroads of the Carolina Lowcountry. "All right," he said, his voice dropping into the crisp, authoritative tone of a commander briefing his troops. "Let's review the primary exfil plan." He looked at Isabella. "This is for your benefit as much as ours. In a dynamic situation, knowledge is survival. The more you know, the better you can react if we get separated." He treated her inclusion in the briefing as a matter of course, a stark contrast to her father's world, where women were expected to be seen and not heard, especially when the men were discussing serious matters. "The senator's first move," Elias began, tracing a thick red line along the major interstate highways, "will be to establish a dragnet here, here, and here. State police roadblocks, APBs on any vehicle matching the description of the one we used. Standard procedure. Predictable. He'll assume we're making a run for a major airport or trying to cross a state line as fast as possible." He then tapped a network of thin blue lines that represented the waterways. "He's a creature of the land. He thinks in terms of roads and cars. He'll neglect the rivers, at least for the first 12 hours. That's our window." He explained the plan. They would abandon the sedan a few miles away. A small, high-speed river skiff was hidden in a cove nearby. Ben, an expert navigator, would pilot them through the winding, treacherous waterways of the Ace Basin, a vast, undeveloped estuary that was a maze to anyone who didn't know it intimately. They would travel by night without lights, using military-grade night vision equipment. Their destination was a remote, isolated fish camp on a barrier island, a place so insignificant it didn't even appear on most maps. From there, a long-range fishing vessel owned by a trusted associate would take them out into the Atlantic, far beyond the reach of the Coast Guard's typical patrol patterns. "Once we're in international waters," Elias concluded, "we're ghosts. We can re-enter the country 1,000 miles from here under new identities, and he'll be chasing shadows in the Carolinas for weeks. The plan was audacious, elegant, and terrifying. It relied on precision, timing, and a deep, intimate knowledge of the terrain. It was the work of a master strategist. "What about Martha?" Isabella asked, looking at the older woman who was calmly washing dishes, seemingly unfazed by the military-style briefing happening at her table. "They'll come here. They'll question her. Let 'em come," Martha said without turning around, her voice laced with iron. "This old woman hasn't seen a soul in weeks. Elias who? Never heard of him. They can search the place all they want. By the time they get a warrant, you'll be long gone, and there won't be a trace of you here." She was another soldier in his army, the stoic guardian of the home base. As darkness finally fell, a deep, moonless black that swallowed the landscape, the energy in the house shifted. The quiet preparation was over. It was time to move. Elias handed Isabella a lightweight, waterproof jacket and a small backpack. "Just the essentials," he said. "Anything else is a liability." She thought of the closets full of designer clothes, the jewelry, the heirlooms she had left behind. They meant nothing. The only thing of value she possessed was the life she was now fighting for. They left the house in single file, melting into the shadows like wraiths. Ben led the way, his movements utterly silent, a ghost in the humid night air. Elias came last, his hand resting on the small of Isabella's back, a steady, reassuring pressure guiding her through the darkness. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and alive with the chirping, buzzing chorus of the swamp's nocturnal creatures. They moved for what felt like an eternity through the dense undergrowth, their path illuminated only by the faint, green glow of Ben's night vision goggles. For Isabella, who had never set foot in a wilderness more untamed than a country club garden, it was a terrifying and exhilarating sensory overload. She stumbled on a root, and Elias's hand was there to steady her before she could fall. She felt a surge of gratitude for his quiet, constant presence. He was not just her rescuer, he was her teacher, initiating her into the harsh, beautiful reality of this new world. They reached the hidden cove where the river skiff was moored, a low-slung, matte black boat that looked more like a piece of military hardware than a pleasure craft. Ben was already aboard, running a quiet systems check on the engine. Marcus handed Elias a satellite phone and a small, sealed pouch. "Intel package," he said. "Updated every hour. Martha will be our comms relay if we have to go dark. Good luck, boss." He clapped Elias on the shoulder, a brief, soldierly gesture of camaraderie. "We'll handle the cleanup here." With that, Marcus turned and vanished back into the woods, a silent shadow returning to his post. Ben helped Isabella into the boat, and she settled onto a small bench, her heart pounding. Elias untied the mooring lines and pushed them off from the bank, jumping aboard with a practiced, silent grace as the boat drifted out into the main channel. Ben engaged the engine, which to her surprise made almost no sound at all, just a low, powerful hum. The boat surged forward, cutting a clean, dark line through the inky, glass-like surface of the river. The safe house and the last vestiges of her old life disappeared behind them into the all-consuming darkness. She was adrift in every sense of the word, on a dark river with a man she barely knew, heading toward a future she could not imagine. The fear was a cold, hard knot in her stomach, but beneath it, a strange, fierce joy was beginning to unfurl. For the first time in her life, she was not a passenger in a chauffeured car, heading toward a predetermined destination. She was a fugitive, a soldier, a participant in her own escape. She was, for the very first time, truly and terrifyingly free. The world dissolved into a kinetic blur of rushing wind, the inky blackness of the river and the ghostly green landscape viewed through the night vision goggles Elias handed her. The skiff moved with astonishing speed, a silent black arrow slicing through the heart of the sleeping marsh. Ben stood at the helm, a motionless silhouette, his body perfectly attuned to the subtle shifts of the current and the boat's powerful response. He navigated the labyrinthine waterways with an instinctual, almost supernatural confidence, making sharp turns into narrow channels that seemed to appear out of nowhere, ducking under the low-hanging branches of cypress trees draped in spectral veils of Spanish moss. Isabella, huddled on the bench, held on tight, the wind whipping strands of hair across her face. The initial terror of the journey was slowly being replaced by a strange sense of awe. This was a world she had lived beside her entire life, but had never truly seen. A wild, untamed and dangerous beauty that was a universe away from the manicured lawns and historic facades of Charleston. It was Elias's world. She understood now why he had seemed so out of place, so constrained in the sterile environments of her life. He belonged here, in the places where the lines were blurred, where survival depended on skill and instinct, not on a family name. Elias sat beside her, a silent, watchful presence. He wasn't relaxed, but he was at ease, in his element. He pointed out landmarks in the darkness, a submerged log that could rip the hull out of a normal boat, a particular bend in the river that marked a shortcut, the distant shimmering glow on the horizon that was not a town, but a chemical plant her father's company partially owned. He was teaching her to see the world through his eyes, to read the landscape for threats and opportunities. He was giving her the tools to survive. Your father sees this land as something to be tamed, to be developed, to be sold, he said, his voice a low rumble just loud enough to be heard over the hum of the engine. He sees lines on a map. He doesn't see the life in it. That's his weakness. He can't fight in a territory he doesn't understand. It was a profound strategic insight, and it gave her a flicker of hope. They were not just running. They were using their enemy's ignorance against him. After what felt like hours, Ben throttled back the engine, and the boat slowed, gliding into a quiet, secluded lagoon. The air here was thick with the salty tang of the nearby ocean. "We'll lay up here till dawn," Elias said. "Too risky to make the final run to the island in the dark, even for Ben. Tides are tricky out there." Ben expertly guided the boat into a dense thicket of reeds, the tall grasses closing around them like a curtain, making them invisible from the main channel. He cut the engine, and the sudden, profound silence was almost deafening, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the hull and the distant cry of a night bird. They were safe, for now, a fragile, temporary truce in their war. Ben produced a thermos of hot coffee and some dry, high-energy biscuits, the kind of food designed for sustenance, not pleasure. They ate in near silence, the three of them a small, self-contained unit, isolated in the vast, dark wilderness. In the cramped confines of the boat, the physical proximity between Isabella and Elias was electric. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the faint, clean scent of his skin beneath the salt and wind. The memories of that one night, the feel of his hands on her, the sound of his breathing in the dark, came rushing back with an intensity that left her breathless. He had been a ghost in her heart for 5 years, a half-remembered dream. Now he was here, solid and real, a few inches away, and the chasm of those 5 lost years felt both immense and insignificant. "Elias," she began, her voice barely a whisper, needing to break the silence that held all of their unspoken history. "That night, the morning you left, I thought..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "I thought you used me. I thought it meant nothing." He turned to her, and in the faint green glow of the instrument panel, she could see the deep, weary sadness in his eyes. "I know what you thought," he said, his voice raw with an emotion he rarely allowed to surface. "I wanted to stay, Isabella. Every instinct in me screamed to stay. But the soldier in me, the soldier knew the mission was impossible. We were compromised. The enemy had us surrounded and outgunned. The only tactical option was a full retreat. So you just ran?" The accusation was soft, but it carried the weight of 5 years of pain. "No," he said, and his voice was fierce, protective. "I didn't run. I redeployed. There's a difference. I have thought about you every single day for 5 years. Every decision I made, every risk I took, every dollar my company earned. It was all to build the arsenal I needed to come back here and fight this war on my own terms. To be able to stand in front of your father and not be the insect he could crush under his heel. To be able to stand in front of you and be a man who could offer you something other than a life on the run." He reached out, his calloused thumb gently tracing the line of her jaw. His touch was a jolt, a spark that reignited a fire she thought had long ago turned to ash. "I never for 1 second thought you were weak," he continued, his gaze intense. I knew you were a survivor. I knew you would do what you had to do to endure. I just had to hope that I could get back before it was too late." His gaze dropped to the simple t-shirt she was wearing, to the space where the extravagant diamond engagement ring from Richard had been. He didn't need to say the rest. He had made it just in time. The raw, unvarnished truth of his words washed over her, healing a wound she had thought was fatal. He hadn't abandoned her. He had been fighting for her, in his own silent, strategic way all this time. The anger and humiliation she had carried for so long finally dissolved, replaced by a profound, aching wave of love and gratitude that was so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. "I waited," she whispered, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. "I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I waited." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm against her skin. "Your wait is over," he murmured. "From now on, we fight together." In that moment, surrounded by the primal darkness of the swamp, in a stolen boat, on the run for their lives, Isabella Devereaux felt a sense of peace and belonging that she had never known. She had found her home. It wasn't a place, it was a person. It was the cold, quiet soldier who had disappeared in the night, only to return and lead her into a war. As dawn approached, painting the eastern sky in delicate shades of pearl and rose, the tension returned. Ben, who had been dozing in short, alert catnaps, was instantly awake and running another systems check. Elias was on the satellite phone, his voice a low, clipped murmur as he received an update from Marcus. His expression grew grim. "They found the car," he said after he hung up, his voice tight. "Sooner than I expected, and my name is all over the news." Elias Thorne, disgruntled former security guard with a history of PTSD. "They're using my service record against me, painting me as a dangerous, unstable veteran who kidnapped a vulnerable heiress." He spat the words out, the injustice of it, a bitter taste. "Your father is good," he conceded with a grudging respect. "He's controlling the narrative perfectly." "Will it matter?" Isabella asked, her fear returning. "Once we're on that boat, will any of it matter?" "It matters if we don't get to the boat," Elias said, his eyes scanning the now brightening horizon. "The Coast Guard will have been alerted. They'll be watching the inlets. The fish camp is no longer a secure destination. We need a new plan." The seamless, elegant strategy had been compromised. The enemy had adapted, and now they were trapped in the marsh, with the sun rising and the full weight of the state bearing down on them. The atmosphere in the skiff, which had softened with the intimacy of the pre-dawn confession, now crackled with a new, sharper tension. The rising sun was not a promise of a new day, but the relentless sweep of a searchlight, exposing them, making them vulnerable. Elias, Ben, and Isabella were no longer just fugitives, they were a target. Elias stood at the bow, a pair of powerful military-grade binoculars pressed to his eyes, scanning the distant line where the marsh met the sea. He was a statue of coiled energy, his mind racing, processing the new intelligence, recalculating the odds, formulating a new plan of attack. Ben, at the helm, was studying a digital chart on a waterproof tablet, his brow furrowed in concentration, cross-referencing their position with tidal charts and known patrol routes. Isabella sat between them, a silent observer, feeling a sickening sense of helplessness. This was his world, his language. She was a liability, a civilian in a combat zone. The guilt of it was a heavy weight. It was because of her that they were in this position. It was her father's power that was closing in on them. "We can't go east," Ben said finally, his voice flat, stating a fact that needed no embellishment. "They'll have cutters stationed at every major inlet from Hilton Head to Georgetown. The channel to the fish camp will be a shooting gallery." "Agreed," Elias said, lowering the binoculars. "Going out to sea is no longer an option, so we go in deeper." He turned and looked back the way they had come, into the dense, tangled heart of the swamp. "We go where a cutter can't follow, where a helicopter can't see us." Ben's eyes widened slightly. "You mean the Blackwater," he said, the name spoken with a note of deep respect and caution. "Boss, that's... No one goes in there." "We do," Elias said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He turned to Isabella, his expression serious. The Blackwater is an old network of cypress swamps and abandoned rice plantations. It's a maze. Most of the channels are choked with fallen trees and gators the size of small cars. It's considered impassable, which is exactly why they won't look for us there. Not at first. It will buy us time, but it's going to be dangerous and slow. He was giving her a choice. He was laying out the risks, allowing her to weigh in on the decision that would determine her fate. It was a level of respect she had never been afforded by her father or Richard, men who had only ever issued decrees. "You know the way?" she asked, her voice steady, refusing to show the fear that was churning in her stomach. "I know it better than any man alive," Elias said. "My grandmother grew up on the edge of it. She taught me how to read the water, how to find the old ways through. It's my home turf." That simple statement resonated deeply. He wasn't just a soldier trained in foreign deserts. He was a son of this soil, of this swamp. His roots here ran deeper and truer than her own family's, whose claim to this land was based on deeds and titles, not on knowledge and blood. "Then that's where we go," she said, her voice firm. She would not be a liability. She would be a member of the team. A flicker of pride and approval showed in Elias's eyes. He gave a sharp, decisive nod to Ben. "Let's move." Ben spun the helm, and the skiff turned, heading not toward the open sea but deeper into the suffocating embrace of the cypress swamp. The character of the journey changed immediately. The wide open river channels gave way to narrow, winding creeks where the ancient trees formed a dense canopy overhead, plunging them into a perpetual emerald twilight. The water here was still and black, its surface like polished obsidian, perfectly reflecting the gnarled branches and hanging moss, creating a disorienting upside-down world. The air grew thick and heavy, filled with the rich, loamy smell of decay and the incessant hum of insects. It felt like they were entering another time, a prehistoric world that was hostile to human intrusion. Their progress was painstakingly slow. Ben had to navigate by inches, nudging the boat through impossibly narrow gaps, his hands constantly on the throttle, reversing to avoid a submerged log, then surging forward through a clear patch. Elias stood at the bow, using a long pole to push aside floating debris and to probe the depth of the murky water ahead. It was a grueling, physically demanding task, and the two men worked with a seamless, unspoken coordination. Isabella's role was to be a lookout. Elias taught her what to watch for: the subtle ripple on the water's surface that indicated a submerged obstacle, the V-shaped wake of a swimming snake, the unnatural stillness of a log that was, in fact, a sunning alligator. At first, she saw nothing but a chaotic tangle of green and brown, but gradually, as she forced herself to focus, to really see, the swamp began to reveal its secrets. Her senses, dulled by a lifetime of curated, civilized environments, began to sharpen. She started to notice the patterns in the chaos. She spotted a low-hanging branch just in time, her sharp cry of "Wait!" allowing Ben to cut the engine before they would have been swept from the boat. Elias looked back at her, a single appreciative nod that was more rewarding than any compliment she had ever received. She was contributing. She was part of the unit. The hours crawled by. The heat and humidity were suffocating. Mosquitoes descended in whining clouds. They were tired, hungry, and soaked with a mixture of sweat and swamp water. Yet in the midst of the misery, Isabella felt a strange sense of purpose, a gritty satisfaction she had never experienced. This was real, this struggle, this discomfort, this shared fight for survival. It was more authentic than any moment of her previous life. Late in the afternoon, they heard it, a faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump that was not part of the swamp's natural chorus, a helicopter. Elias immediately gave a hand signal. Ben cut the engine and guided the skiff under the broad, sheltering overhang of an ancient hollow cypress tree. They were instantly plunged into a deep, dark cave of roots and branches. The sound grew louder, closer, The helicopter was making a low, slow pass, methodically searching the swamp. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. They were so exposed. She could feel the percussive beat of the rotor blades in her chest. She held her breath, pressing herself against the rough bark of the tree, trying to make herself smaller, to will them invisible. The helicopter passed directly overhead, so close she could see the dark shape of it through the leaves. It hovered for a long, agonizing moment, and she was certain they had been spotted. Then it moved on, the sound of its blades slowly receding until it was once again swallowed by the hum of the swamp. They waited in the suffocating silence for a full 10 minutes before Elias finally gave the all clear. They had been lucky. The canopy was too thick, but it was a stark reminder that the hunt was on, and their enemy had resources they could not hope to match. The brief, exultant feeling of freedom she had felt was replaced by the cold, hard reality of their situation. They were not free. They were caged in a wilderness, and the hunters were closing in. The close call with the helicopter shifted the dynamic once more. The swamp, which had begun to feel like a sanctuary, a place of shared struggle and nascent intimacy, now felt like a trap. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every rustle of leaves could be an approaching enemy. The grim reality was that they could not stay in the skiff forever. They were burning through fuel, their meager food supplies were dwindling, and their physical and mental endurance was being worn down by the constant tension and the oppressive heat. They needed a new sanctuary, a more permanent one. As dusk began to fall, casting long, eerie shadows across the black water, Elias made a decision. He directed Ben toward a barely perceptible break in the dense wall of trees, a channel so narrow and choked with vegetation that it seemed impossible for the boat to pass. "There's an island," Elias said, his voice low and strained with fatigue. "A piece of high ground about a mile in. Old hunting cabin on it. We'll be safer there on foot than we are on the water." Getting the boat through the final stretch was a brutal, punishing ordeal. They had to get out and physically push and pull the heavy skiff through the thick, sucking mud and tangled roots of the shallows. The water was waist-deep, cold, and crawling with unseen things. Isabella worked alongside the men, her hands raw, her muscles screaming in protest, refusing to be a burden. She felt a snake slide past her leg and bit back a scream, the iron discipline she had learned from them over the last 24 hours taking hold. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they broke through into a small hidden lagoon. In the center of it, shrouded in the deepening twilight, was a small island, a mound of solid earth rising a few feet above the water, crowned with a stand of tall pine trees. They dragged the boat onto the muddy bank, concealing it as best they could under a canopy of low-hanging branches. Exhausted, filthy, and covered in scratches and insect bites, they stumbled onto the solid ground of the island. The cabin was little more than a dilapidated shack, its timbers grey and rotting, its roof sagging in the middle. But to Isabella, it looked like a palace. It was shelter. It was a defensible position. While Ben immediately began a silent, methodical patrol of the island's small perimeter, Elias pushed open the creaking door of the cabin. The air inside was thick with the musty smell of mildew and disuse. In the fading light, she could make out a single room with a dirt floor, a crude stone fireplace, and a rough-hewn wooden table. It was a primitive, desperate refuge, but it was theirs. As darkness fell, a profound, bone-deep exhaustion settled over them. Elias managed to start a small, nearly smokeless fire in the hearth, its flickering light a small beacon of warmth and civilization in the vast, hostile wilderness. They huddled around it, sharing the last of their coffee and biscuits in silence. The camaraderie of the journey had been replaced by a grim, unspoken understanding of their predicament. They were cornered. "What now, Elias?" Ben asked, his voice a low rumble, breaking the silence. "We can't stay here forever. They'll start putting search parties on the ground soon." "I know," Elias said, staring into the flames. He looked older, the immense weight of his responsibility etched onto his face. "Marcus is working on a new extraction plan, ground transport, but we need to get to a rendezvous point on the mainland, 20 miles north of here, and we'll have to do it on foot. 20 miles. Through this, The thought was staggering. Isabella looked down at her own soft, city-bred body. She had been pushed to her absolute limit, and that was just on the boat. She wasn't sure she had the strength to go on. As if reading her thoughts, Elias turned to her, his expression softening. "We'll rest here for a day," he said. "Regain our strength. We move the day after tomorrow at night." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small, advanced-looking first aid kit. He began to gently clean and dress a long, deep scratch on her arm she hadn't even realized she'd gotten. His touch was surprisingly gentle, his movements efficient and sure. "You're doing good, Isabella," he said quietly, his voice a balm on her frayed nerves. "You're stronger than you think you are." His simple words of praise were like a shot of adrenaline. Her father had only ever praised her for her beauty, her poise, her obedience. Elias praised her for her strength. That night, they slept in shifts. Isabella took the first watch, sitting by the dying embers of the fire, a heavy, antiquated shotgun Elias had found in the cabin resting across her lap. The weight of it was both terrifying and reassuring. Outside, the swamp was a symphony of alien sounds. Every snap of a twig, every splash in the water sent a jolt of fear through her, but she did not falter. She was a sentry guarding her comrades, and she would not fail her mission. Sometime in the deep of the night, Elias came to relieve her. He sat down beside her in the near darkness, their shoulders brushing. "You should sleep," he whispered. "I can't," she confessed. "My mind won't shut off." For a long time, they sat in a comfortable silence, two soldiers sharing a watch. "Tell me about them," she said finally, needing to understand the bond he shared with his men. "Marcus and Ben." A rare, soft smile touched Elias's lips. "We're all that's left of our unit," he said, his voice tinged with an old sadness. "We went through hell together in places you've only seen on the news. When you face what we faced, you forge a bond that's stronger than blood. We trust each other with our lives. It's that simple. When I got out, I couldn't just leave them behind. So we built the company, a new mission, a way to use our skills for something other than breaking things." He paused, the firelight casting flickering shadows on his scarred face. "But I never told them about you," he admitted. "You were the one part of my life that was just mine, the one thing I had to keep separate from the war. You were my hope for peace." The confession was a raw, vulnerable thing, a glimpse past the layers of his armor. It was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to her. In the quiet intimacy of the dilapidated cabin, surrounded by a world of danger, Isabella realized she was hopelessly, irrevocably in love with this man. Not the ghost she had clung to for 5 years, but the real, flawed, formidable man who sat beside her. Their moment of peace was shattered by the crackle of the satellite phone. It was Marcus. Elias's entire demeanor snapped back to that of a commander. His face grew hard, his voice crisp. "What is it?" he demanded. He listened for a long moment, his expression growing darker with every second. "When?" he asked. Another pause. "Understood. We're on our way." He ended the call and turned to them, his eyes like chips of flint. "Change of plans," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "We're moving. Now." "What happened?" Ben asked, already on his feet, grabbing his gear. "That was not a military helicopter we saw yesterday," Elias said, his voice laced with a cold fury she had never heard before. "It was a private one, chartered out of a local airfield. My guy on the inside just confirmed it. It was chartered by Richard Sterling." The name hit Isabella like a physical blow. Richard, the jilted groom. And he wasn't alone, Elias continued, his gaze locking with Isabella's, his expression a mixture of grim warning and profound rage. "Your father was on that helicopter, Isabella. They're not just using the police, they're hunting us themselves." The war had just become personal, and it was about to get bloody.